you ever wonder what it really meant to be a baker when baking was the deadliest job the Victorians ever invented? Today, I want to take you back into those basements, and as we walk in, I want you to notice how your body reacts, because everything you're about to feel, they felt every single day. Let's start with the thing you'd notice first the moment you descended those stairs. The heat, not warmth, not fresh bread on a Sunday morning heat. I mean a suffocating wall of fire heat radiating from ovens that never slept. Ovens that glowed day and night because bakers worked 18 to 20 hours at a time, 6 days a week, sometimes more. Imagine stepping into a stone basement at 3 in the morning. The air so thick with heat that your sweat didn't drip. It clung. It pasted itself to you. Every breath felt like inhaling from inside a furnace. The original context? Victorian families didn't have ovens. You relied entirely on the local baker, and because you wanted hot rolls for breakfast, God forbid you ate cold bread, bakers had to start their shift in the middle of the night, work until afternoon, catch a few hours of sleep, wake up, start over. Contrast that with your life now. When was the last time you pulled an all-nighter because your entire neighborhood demanded it? The last time you worked until sunrise and called it normal? And be honest, if you stepped into that heat for even 15 minutes, do you think you'd last? Now let me bring you deeper, because the heat wasn't the first thing trying to kill you. It was the air itself. Picture flour dust hanging in the air like fog, a haze of powder that coated your eyelashes, crept into your nostrils, your throat, the folds of your clothes, and finally, your lungs. Victorians had a name for what it did to you: baker's lung, a slow suffocation by inflammation, infection, and irritation. Almost every baker showed signs of lung disease. Many developed tuberculosis. Others collapsed from apoplexy, what we'd call a stroke. But it wasn't just flour. Remember, bakers weren't using pure ingredients. Your bread, your daily bread, was often stretched with alum, chalk, plaster of Paris, bone dust, and anything else that would make it look whiter and weigh more. Alum, especially, was everywhere, illegal since 1758, ignored by everyone. The bakers who handled it inhaled it day after day. It tore up their insides, poisoned their bowels, and slashed their life expectancy to shreds. Contrast that with now. If you found one questionable ingredient in your bread, you'd be tweeting about it within seconds. So imagine this: you're kneading dough mixed with toxic powder. The room is sealed, no ventilation, you're sweating into the bowl, and with every breath, you're filling your lungs with a substance banned centuries ago. Let me ask you something. How long do you think you would survive breathing that in? But the job wasn't just killing you slowly. Sometimes it was killing you violently. Close your eyes for a moment and picture a flour sack. Not a modern lightweight bag, but a 280-pound monster, almost impossible to lift alone. Flour arrived in bulk, and bakers had to haul these sacks, sometimes several a day, up and down stairs while half asleep, dehydrated and malnourished. Now imagine what that did to your spine, your joints, your heartbeat. The original context? Victorian baking was done without machinery. The kneading machines and aerated systems we take for granted today existed only at the end of the century, and even then, most bakeries couldn't afford them, so everything was done by hand or foot. Yes, bakers sometimes kneaded dough with their feet, pushing their whole body weight into it because the mixture was too heavy for arms alone. Try to picture that sensation: the cold dough squeezing between your toes, the pressure of leaning with your entire weight, the ache creeping up your calves as you repeated the motion hundreds of times a day. Now contrast it with today, when the hardest thing you lift during baking is the mixer bowl. Tell me, do you think your back could handle carrying flour like that at 3 in the morning? Let's move to the part few people talk about: the darkness. Not metaphorical darkness, real physical basement darkness. Most Victorian bakehouses were underground, dungeons, dismal, dirty, pestiferous, as one observer put it. The walls blackened with soot, water closets nearby leaking fumes, rats skittering across the floor, damp rising through the stones. Imagine sleeping there, because bakers did sleep there. Many were locked inside by their bosses, literally locked in, so they wouldn't go home, oversleep, and miss the next shift. You'd lie down on the floor, the stone cold against your spine, the smell of gas pipes drifting over you, the air so low in oxygen that your head spun. Contrast that with your life now, your bed, your privacy, your ability to step outside and breathe real air. So let me ask you, could you fall asleep in a basement like that, knowing the only fresh air you'd feel again was whatever leaked under the door? And now we get to perhaps the cruelest part, the life expectancy. Everything I've described so far funnels into one brutal truth. Victorian bakers rarely lived past 40. In some cities, the average age was even lower, around around 30. Think about what that means. You would spend your entire adult life working, sweating, choking on dust, barely sleeping, and by the time you finally reached an age where you might slow down, your body would collapse, your heart would weaken, your lungs would fail, your spine would warp, and your family, who depended on you for bread, would now be depending on someone else because you didn't survive long enough to enjoy the life you spent your own making food for others. So let me ask you, if you knew the job you started at 16 would kill you by 35, would you still step into that basement? Before we go any further, I want you to picture yourself standing at the threshold of that Victorian bakehouse. Again, you've felt the heat, you've breathed the dust, you've lifted the sacks, but now I want you to step closer to the ovens themselves, the beating heart of the entire operation, and the place where the job's danger sharpened into something even more punishing. Because if the air tried to kill you slowly, the ovens tried to kill you immediately, and every baker knew that. You'd open the iron door, and the first thing to hit you was the blast, an explosion of heat so intense it felt like your eyebrows curled. The baked loaves crackled in the corners, and the walls around them gleamed with a layer of soot no one bothered to scrape off anymore. You'd feel that heat rushing into your eyes, forcing them to tear, and you'd blink because the world grew blurry every time you looked directly at the fire. Now imagine doing that hundreds of times a day, every single day, for 20 hours at a stretch. The original context? Victorian ovens weren't automated. They didn't regulate themselves. The temperature didn't hold steady. You controlled it by sheer instinct, by reading the glow, feeling the air, and pressing your palm against the surface to judge how hot it was. If you misjudged the heat, you burned the batch, lost the customers, lost your job. Contrast this with today. Your oven beeps when it reaches temperature. You don't need to stick your face near the fire. You don't need to trust your skin as a thermometer. So tell me, could you stand in front of a roaring Victorian oven all night long, your skin peeling, your eyes watering, your pulse thudding in your neck like a drum? Let's be honest, most people now wouldn't last 10 minutes, but the danger didn't stop at heat. Your entire schedule was designed to break you. Imagine this, it's Saturday afternoon, and instead of a weekend off, you finally get your rest. A 19-hour gap before you start again early Sunday morning. 19 hours after a 100-hour week. That was considered generous. When your only break is less than a single day after an entire week of work, time loses meaning. Your body slips into a survival rhythm. Sleep when you collapse. Wake when someone shakes you. Eat whatever scraps you can grab with one hand while kneading with the other. Now compare that with today, where a 60-hour work week is called grueling, where sleep deprivation is a badge of honor only in jokes and startup meetings. Let me ask you, how would your mind feel after 3 months of 100-hour weeks? Would you think straight? Would you remember your own name? Would you trust your hands near fire and iron and boiling water? Or would you start making mistakes? Because Victorian bakers made mistakes all the time, and the consequences were immediate. Burns, collapses, respiratory attacks, falls down the steep, flour-slicked cellar stairs. The job wasn't just deadly because of slow poisoning, it was deadly because the workers were too exhausted to protect themselves. Now step with me deeper into the story, the place where exhaustion turned into something crueler, something uglier. Let's talk about the lock-ins. The research records show that many bakers were deliberately locked into the bakehouse by their employers so they couldn't leave and oversleep their next shift. They slept on the floor, in the heat, in the damp, with the fumes of the water closet drifting across the room and the stench of gas pipes leaking in the air. Imagine lying there, your clothes still wet with sweat, your lungs tight from breathing flour, your hands burning from the oven. You can't stretch out because the space is so cramped. You curl into yourself, hugging your own elbows just to stay warm as the heat from the ovens fades. A rat runs across your ankle. You flinch, but you can't get up. You're too tired. This wasn't a job, it was captivity. Contrast it with now. If your employer locked you inside your workplace for even 10 minutes, lawsuits would be filed by lunch. Headlines, outrage, hashtags. But in the Victorian era, it was so common that workers simply accepted it. So let me ask you, if you knew the door behind you was going to lock until sunrise, would you step inside? Now I want you to feel something deeper, something more intimate, the smell. Every profession has a scent. For bakers today, it's warm butter, toasted sugar, fresh yeast, comfort, safety. Not in the Victorian era. Their bakehouses smelled like a mixture of hot dust, sweat, stale dough, dripping grease, rotting drainage, damp stone, and the faint chemical sting of alum dust drifting through the air. The smell clung to their skin, their hair, their clothes. A Victorian baker could walk past you on the street and you'd know instantly where he'd come from. He carried the scent of his workplace like a second shadow. And sometimes, especially toward the end, when illness set in, he carried sickness too. Persistent coughing, sunken eyes, a pale, almost grey complexion, hands cracked from heat, a voice strained from hours of breathing in fumes. Doctors who examined London bakers often said the same thing. None of them were healthy. Think about that, an entire profession where good health didn't exist. Contrast that with now, where bakers make TikToks in spotless kitchens bathed in soft lighting, wearing clean aprons, smiling. So tell me, if you smelled like that, if you coughed like that, if your skin looked like that, would anyone today call your job wholesome? Now let's talk about something people today almost never consider: the emotional isolation. You didn't see the sunrise. You didn't see your own family awake. You didn't go to church. You didn't celebrate holidays. Because remember, bread was always needed most when other people had time off. Their rest was your busiest shift. Their meals were your labor. Think about that. Your entire life revolved around ensuring the neighborhood ate bread they'd take for granted. Contrast with today, you pick up a loaf at the store without thinking twice. You tear into it without imagining the hands that made it or the cost. In the Victorian world, bakers existed like ghosts, awake when others slept, working when others relaxed, dying while others lived. So let me ask you, how long could you live in a world where no one ever saw you? Now, before we move forward, I want to bring you into one of the most shocking parts of this job, the adulteration crisis. This wasn't just about hurting customers, it was about hurting the bakers themselves. Bread was stretched with powders meant to whiten it: alum, chalk, bone dust, plaster of Paris. These were toxic, and bakers not only handled them, they inhaled them constantly. Every time they poured a new batch of flour into the trough, a cloud of powder burst upward, filling the air. Studies from the time showed that bread could be nearly 1/3 not flour. It weighed more, sold better, looked prettier, and slowly destroyed the people who made it. Today, you worry about preservatives and additives. But imagine if your daily bread contained building materials. Let me ask you, if you had to knead dough full of chemicals every day, would you trust your own hands? Now I want to take you into the part of the story that almost no one talks about, the part hidden behind the flour sacks, the heat and the exhaustion, the part that made Victorian baking not just deadly, but cruel in a way that seeps into your bones when you think about it. Because beneath the physical suffering, there was something darker, the erosion of the baker's body from the inside out. Picture yourself standing at the mixing trough. It's taller than your waist and built of rough splintered wood. You lean into it, pushing your arms deep into the dough. The mixture is thick, tense, elastic, almost alive under your fists. You knead until your muscles tremble. Then you switch to your knuckles, punching the dough again and again. And just when your arms can't take it anymore, your feet take over. You step into the trough, barefoot, and begin pressing the dough with your whole body weight, your toes gripping, your arches straining, your calves clenching with every push. It's sticky, heavy, and cold. The flour dust coats your skin while the heat of the room crawls down your back. Victorian bakers called this killing labor. It wasn't poetic, it was literal. Their joints swelled, their tendons inflamed. Their legs shook uncontrollably long after the shift ended. Now contrast it with today. The machine kneader does this work. You press a button, you walk away. You check your phone while it does the labor that once shaved years off a man's life. So let me ask you, if your job required you to knead dough until your bones screamed, could you keep going? But the violence of the work didn't end with muscles and lungs. It attacked your heart. Victorian physicians reported that bakers frequently died of heart disease and apoplexy, conditions linked directly to overheating, dehydration, and the constant strain of working in extreme temperatures. Many collapsed during shifts. Some fell into the ovens. Others simply dropped to the floor, their bodies finally giving up after years of punishment. Think about that for a moment. You're working near a burning oven. You're lightheaded from lack of sleep. Your breath is thin because the air is thick with dust. Your heart pounds wildly in your chest, and there's no break, no chair, no chance to catch your breath. Your employer stands nearby, reminding you that the neighborhood expects its morning loaf. Contrast this with now. You count your steps, you hydrate, you track your resting heart rate, you worry about burnout if you answer emails on a Saturday. So let me ask you, if your pulse was hammering out of rhythm while you stood inches from a 500-degree oven, would you keep working? Because Victorian bakers did, every single day. Now let me show you the part of the job that hits the deepest, the starvation of the worker who fed the world. This part surprises people. You'd think that bakers, surrounded by food all day, would have eaten well. They didn't. Here's why. Bread wasn't made for the bakers. It was made for the customers. Every ounce of dough was accounted for. Every loaf was sold by weight, and bakers couldn't afford to feed themselves from the product. Many lived on scraps, sometimes tea, sometimes nothing at all until the end of a 20-hour shift. The heat dehydrated them. The fumes sickened them. The toxins upset their digestion, and the chronic exhaustion burned calories faster than they could replace them. The research describes bakers as pale, gaunt, and often visibly malnourished. Their bodies couldn't absorb nutrients properly because alum, one of the most common adulterants, interfered with digestion and triggered chronic bowel problems. Imagine feeding an entire city while starving slowly yourself. Contrast that with today. You eat while you cook, you nibble the ingredients, you sample the product, you bake for joy, for comfort, for pleasure. So let me ask you, if your job starved you while you fed others, how long would you last? Now step back with me into the social world of the Victorian era, the world that shaped how bakers were seen. Because much of the tragedy came from one fact: nobody respected the people keeping them alive. Bread was essential. Bakers were not. They were treated as unskilled, replaceable labor, young, disposable. The moment one collapsed, another boy, usually a teenager, stepped into his place. Apprentices were cheap, desperate, and afraid to complain. It's no wonder the average age of bakers in some cities hovered around 30.75 years. They didn't grow old. They were replaced before they could. Contrast that with now, where skilled bakers are admired, celebrated, followed on Instagram, invited to compete on television. Victorian bakers weren't celebrated. They were invisible. So tell me, could you give your entire life to a craft, knowing no one saw you? Let's step into another reality they lived with every day: filth and disease. Imagine this scene. You're kneading dough barefoot in a basement. There's a drain running across the floor. It leaks. It always leaks. Sometimes sewage backs up from the water closet next door. Sometimes gas pipes hiss quietly in the corner, just enough to sting your eyes, but not enough to knock you out. You take a breath you wish you hadn't. Bakers inhaled microbes, mold, damp fumes, and disease constantly. Heavy humid air stagnated in every corner. Colds turned into infections. Infections turned into chronic illness. Chronic illness turned into fatal complications. Flour dust stuck to every wet surface, including your lungs, creating a paste that irritated your airways. Many bakers coughed blood by their 30s. Some developed erysipelas, a painful skin infection caused by bacteria thriving in dirty, moist environments. Others battled rheumatic fever triggered by chronic inflammation. Contrast that with today. Commercial bakeries are regulated, ventilated, sanitized. You wash your hands, you wear gloves, you stand on clean surfaces. So let me ask you, if your workplace smelled like sewage and tasted like dust, would you walk through that door every morning? Victorian bakers did. Now I want to bring you into the night, the moment after the ovens quieted, the rolling pins stopped, and the bakehouse fell silent. Because that silence wasn't peaceful, it was haunted. Imagine the final hour of a 20-hour shift. You've been awake for so long that the world flickers in and out of clarity. Your arms tremble, your knees buckle, your eyes burn. The room looks warped because the heat has blurred the air. You're cleaning the boards, brushing flour from the counters, sweeping dust into piles. Every movement feels like wading through water. You don't know if you're hungry or thirsty or just numb. And then the door closes. You hear the lock. Your boss is gone. You're trapped until dawn. You lie on the floor using a sack of flour as a pillow. Your sweat dries sticky on your skin. Your breath whistles weakly between coughs. The rats scurry. The pipes drip. The oven ticks as it cools. You stare at the ceiling. You wonder how long your body can take this. Contrast that with now. Your shift ends. You go home. You shower. You collapse into a clean bed. You wake up to sunlight. So let me ask you one more thing. If the last thing you saw before sleep was a dark, damp basement, and the first thing you saw upon waking was the same, could you survive that life for years? Victorian bakers tried, but many didn't. Now I want you to step with me into the part of the story where everything finally breaks, where the Victorian baker's world begins showing the cracks that would eventually lead to reform. But before we talk about change, we need to talk about the heartbreak that made change unavoidable. Because beneath every loaf of bread, beneath every dawn delivery, there was a quiet epidemic the public didn't see. The slow disappearance of an entire generation of bakers. Families knew it. Doctors knew it. Employers pretended not to. And customers simply wanted their bread. There's an old phrase from the era, half whispered, half resigned, that bakers didn't grow old. And when you step back into their world, it feels painfully true. Most were dead or incapacitated by 40. Many didn't reach that. Some died in their 20s, their lungs shredded from flour dust, their hearts weakened from heat, their bodies exhausted beyond repair. Let me paint you a scene. Your co-worker, he's maybe 28, maybe 30. It's hard to tell because everyone looks older than they are, has been coughing for months. At first it was a tickle, then it was persistent, then painful. Now he spits blood into a rag he keeps in his apron, but he keeps kneading, pressing, lifting, because no work means no pay, and no pay means no food. One morning you come in and he's not there. He's died in the night. No funeral leave, no shift disruption, just a young apprentice, 15 years old, quietly taking his place. Contrast that with today, where a workplace death would stop entire industries, spark investigations, ignite outrage. Let me ask you, could you go back to work in a place where your friend just died on the floor you're standing on? Victorian bakers did, because they had no choice. And that brings us to another truth, one Victorians rarely wrote down, but one the research makes painfully clear. Children carried this industry. Most apprentices were boys, some as young as 12, many around 14 or 15. They performed the same exhausting labor as grown men. They inhaled the same dust. They carried the same sacks. They slept on the same floors. And because they were young, they were cheaper and easier to replace. Small bodies meant quicker declines. Early exposure meant earlier death. Their childhoods ended the moment they tied their apron strings. Imagine being 14 years old, standing barefoot in a mixing trough at 3 in the morning, kneading dough with your legs trembling beneath you. Imagine being too tired to cry, too hungry to stand straight, too addicted to survival to stop working. Now contrast it with your teenage years, the freedom, the sunlight, the sleep. So tell me, if you had been born then instead of now, which version of yourself would you have become? Let's shift slightly, because there was another invisible danger lurking in every Victorian bakehouse, the microscopic world. You see, bakers didn't just inhale flour dust. They inhaled the bacteria, spores, mold, and disease thriving in damp, cramped, overheated basements. Poor ventilation meant every cough lingered in the air. Every infection spread easily. The research lists recurring patterns: rheumatism, erysipelas, chronic fevers, and tuberculosis, cutting workers down in their prime. Think about working every day in humidity, thick enough to water your eyes. Every breath carried someone else's sickness. Every shift, someone coughed until they nearly collapsed. But the ovens had to be fed. The dough had to rise. The city had to eat. Contrast that with the sterile, polished world of modern baking. Clean surfaces, stainless steel equipment, gloves, masks, ventilation. So tell me, would you trust your lungs to survive a place where the air itself was your enemy? Victorian bakers didn't have a choice. Let's move now to something more surprising, something that reveals the painful irony at the center of this story. Bread, the staff of life, was killing people on both sides of the counter. You see, adulterated bread didn't just harm customers. It harmed the bakers first. They inhaled alum, they touched it, they kneaded it. They lived in rooms coated with its residue. It caused bowel problems, dehydration, malnutrition, and chronic digestive disorders. And because the work was physically brutal and nutritionally demanding, these side effects only made labor harder. Imagine kneading dough while enduring stomach cramps from the very ingredients you're using. Imagine sweating in extreme heat while your body struggles to absorb water because alum interferes with hydration. Imagine trying to stay awake when your gut is tied in knots. results. Now contrast that with your bread, clean, safe, regulated. Let me ask you, would you willingly handle ingredients that poisoned you daily? Victorian bakers did, because the profit margins demanded it. But amidst all this suffering, something quietly began shifting. Resistance, bakers formed early unions, whispered about shorter hours, demanded ventilation, pushed for clean shops. Reformers documented conditions, describing bakehouses as dungeons, dismal, dirty, pestiferous. Newspapers published exposés. Health inspectors stumbled into basements and emerged horrified. Adulteration laws began tightening. Mechanized kneaders started appearing in the 1860s, though adoption was slow. But change didn't happen overnight. Machines were expensive. Basements were too small to fit them. Employers resisted. Customers insisted on hot morning rolls, meaning night work continued. Progress trickled in over decades, not days. Think about that. People died for years while the world hesitated to give up the luxury of fresh breakfast bread. Contrast it with now, where convenience rarely costs lives. So let me ask you, if your favorite comfort food required someone else's suffering, would you still crave it? Victorians did, but they didn't know the cost. Let's close with one final vignette, because I want you to feel the emotional truth of this era one more time before we step back into the present. Imagine the last day of a baker's life. He wakes before dawn, though he barely slept. His lungs feel heavy. His chest burns. He tells himself it's nothing, just a cold, just a flu, just a cough. Everyone coughs. Everyone feels weak. Everyone keeps working. He descends the stairs into the basement. The heat rises up to meet him. The air is thick. The dust is heavy. He starts kneading. His breath grows shorter. His hands tremble. The room tilts. And then, quietly, he collapses. Someone shouts. Someone tries to help. But there's no time. The ovens are still hot. The dough is still rising. The morning rush is coming. Customers will soon be at the door. The shift continues, because it has to. And the next morning, a new apprentice fills his place. That was the life of a Victorian baker. A life measured not in years, but in loaves. And now you're back here, with me, in the present. Breathing clean air, eating safe bread, living in a world where the people who feed you aren't trapped in basements or dying in their 30s. But when you look at a loaf now, soft, warm, harmless, I want you to remember the cost that once came with it. I want you to remember the hands that shook, the lungs that burned, the hearts that failed. I want you to remember that for an entire generation, the humblest job in the world was the deadliest. And now I want to ask you, after hearing all of this, after feeling every step of that journey in your own chest, would you have survived being a Victorian baker if this story opened your eyes or made you feel something? Tell me in the comments. Would you have stepped into that basement? Would you have stayed? And would you like more forgotten stories like this? If you enjoyed the journey, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves history told the way it deserves to be told, through the people who lived it and the lives they left behind. Thank you for watching.